Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted, episode 891. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today is November 20th, 2024.
All right, people out there on the earth, welcome to another show of Anglican Unscripted. This is our happy place. George and Kevin sit down in front of our webcams, press the record button, and talk about what's going on in the world of news, especially Anglican religion news around the world, and there's a lot. It's a lot each week, and it's not hard to cover. It's sometimes hard to fathom what's going on. We report on a church that's ever changing when it shouldn't be changing. We report on church leaders who are not being transparent when they should be transparent. We're reporting at a time when the church has lost focus, and George and I have this great honor to sit here and help you and help the church know what it should be doing. And one of the biggest things I've seen recently with the leadership in the Church of England and around the world is people have forgotten what their job is. And I'm going to tell you right quick, before we get into anything else, I looked up on ChatGPT. I said, give me in one sentence the role of a bishop. You know what ChatGPT said? It was to guard and guide the church. The ChatGPT, an artificial intelligence, knows more about the role of a bishop, an archbishop, than all the theology books you can put in front of you. George, how are you doing this week?
I'm exhausted. We had to move filming back a day because I was so brain dead yesterday. You may not notice any difference, viewers,
Yes,
from my normal brain dead status. I completed a Kairos weekend over at Sumter Correctional Institution, maximum security.
Okay, we need to back up. We have a new audience. Thousands of people do not know what Kairos, happening, and Vocari are. Explain 3-day weekends quick.
This was a 4-day weekend of, basically think of it as a mission encounter. Begins on a Thursday morning around 8 o'clock. And in our setting, we had 4 tables of 6 inmates, residents, with 3 outsiders at each table. You stay at the same seat, stay at the same table, alternate between talks, presentations, then discussion, with worship interspersed in between. These are Christian renewal weekends for men in prison. Only men can participate. It's a men's prison. They have the women's prisons with only women participants. So I was at a table, and at the table of Mark, named after the Gospel of Mark. And there were 6 men plus 2 outside colleagues, and we spent these 4 days on a spiritual journey with these fellows. And it starts off very nerve-wracking. They don't quite know what to expect. You're only allowed to do it once. Some of them sign up because we feed them. And so we bring in Chick-fil-A for lunch and a pizza for dinner. And, when you're getting beans and beans and beans and occasionally rice in a Florida prison, some people sign up for the food. But it is a life-changing, transforming experience. So you start off, everybody's in their own bubble, and by Sunday evening, everybody's arm in arm singing praise to Christ songs. Just 1 or 2 little vignettes. One of the fellows at my table has just finished 35 years, and he was praying because he had asked the court to change his sentence from 4 35-year sentences served consecutively to concurrently. So he was praying that murder, rape, kidnap man. He's actually my age. Did it as a young fellow in his 20s. And, he's, praying, God, would you incline the hearts of the judge till otherwise he's got another 135 years to go. One fellow started off the week, big black guy, said, call me Ollie, had a shaved skull and a knit white cap. is a Nation of Islam fellow. By the end of the week, he's called me Frederick, his birth name, and he had been able to forgive and accept Christ as his Savior, moving out of Islam and back into Christianity. One fellow spoke with me and then shared the story with our table that he's a 73-year-old doing a life term, and his uncle was murdered, and the man who murdered his uncle was now in this prison, and he was planning to murder this fellow because that's just what you do. If somebody kills a member of your gang, your family, your tribe, you kill them.
Eye for an eye.
And during the weekend, the talks on forgiveness, the talks on allowing Christ to heal you, that you need to forgive, you need to love, so convinced him of this that in the break on Saturday night on Saturday evening, after the day had ended, he told us this Sunday morning, he sought out the fellow, and the fellow thought he was going to come up and murder him because, you know, he knew this.
Sure.
The man said, I forgive you for murdering my uncle, and I ask your forgiveness for my wanting to murder you. And the other fellow, you know, was sort of shocked, but he sort of said, okay. And this is what Kairos can do. This is what Kairos can do. So U.S. prisons are not like other prisons. They're, just imagine 1,500 men behind, you know, single-story compounds. It's more like a prison camp from an old army movie, rather than one of these, you know, big institutions with razor wire and guard towers, and it's hot and it stinks. And this is rural Florida, and there's a chicken farm next door. So when the wind's just right, you smell all the chicken.
It's next to the cemetery too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to shower once or twice a week. Don't go to jail, okay, friends? It's not. This is not what you want to do in Florida. And in some cases, this can make men hard and evil and bitter, and in others, they can be guides and ambassadors of Jesus Christ, even if they've got another 135 years to go in their sentence. Yeah. And they can be at peace with themselves and forgive those who have hurt them and seek the pardon of those whom they have hurt. Wonderful program.
It is. I mean, and forgiveness. Forgiveness is an amazing thing because it's not just a word you say, and it's not just an act you're trying to do. It's a direction you have to walk into because it's a long process to forgive. And it's just amazing to see that among inmates who all they've known in their lives is resentment and I'm here because I'm innocent. And, you know, just to give all that up and say, this makes sense. Lord, help me to forgive. Therefore, I can forgive. And you and I have seen forgiveness work so many ways over the years of our ministry that it should be getting a lot more play. But we digress. We're 10 minutes in, and we haven't talked about what people came here to see, George, and that's the news. And the news is, following up to last week, as everybody knows, that Archbishop Justin Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury, leader of the Anglican Communion, has resigned, and there's going to be some fallout to that. First of all, he's looking horrible in his pictures. But now we need to know what's behind the scenes. What was in this Macon report that we need to know about? And some of the people involved in making that report have reached out to us with some information, and we're going to deliver that to you. But I said at the end of last week's episode, what happens to Justin's PTO, his permission to officiate? Is he going to be allowed to go into, in his retirement, go into other provinces and offer the Eucharist and offer to do the sacraments? And I thought that was a big thing we need to follow up on. Here you have B on the story list. PTOs removed from clergy named in the Macon Review. Well, okay, I didn't see that. I read the Macon Review. It's not there.
We got friends, if you have information to the contrary, do put it up in the comments. And this has been so far unconfirmed.
Yes.
But it has been shared with us this morning that those clergy named in the Macon Review have had their permissions to officiate removed. So what this means would be that Justin Welby can no longer function if he is included in this. Now, they may have, I don't know if this is done individually or if it was a blanket thing, but the story coming out from our sources is that those named in the making, the counterattack has begun. In other words, let me back up a tiny bit by saying the resignation of Justin Welby did not end this issue. It actually just started the ball rolling. The survivors caucuses, and I'll call it a caucus because there's several affiliated, unaffiliated groups. There's one called the House of Survivors. There's one fellow who goes by the name of Graham. Andrew Greystone's a writer who's written about this extensively. It's not a single entity, but they all are allied in their goals. And it's not just Smythe. There's the Trevor DeVenemet. He's got a complicated list. There's several, abuse cases that are all being, and what's happening is that they now have the megaphone. They have the upper hand. Justin Welby went to Jerusalem this past week, and as Kevin mentioned, the photos, he's aged. His hair has gone white. His face has fallen. I mean, just the man is a wreck, physical-looking wreck. And he's, well, that's where he is. And basically, he's now a non-person as far as I can tell. Then this morning, news that the PTOs of the clergy named in the Macon Review have been pulled, and their calls for the Stephen Cottrell, the Archbishop of York, to step down. Their calls for William Nye, the General Secretary of the Archbishop's Council, to go. Stephen Conway, the Bishop of Lincoln, Stephen Croft, the Bishop of Oxford, Joe Bailey Wales, and others touched in one degree or another by the Smythe scandal, all of the abuse scandals. It's all coming out where people are standing up and saying these people have to leave their jobs and resign, and the world is getting up and taking notice. In the past, people have said they're bad people, they need to go, and just went an ear and out the other. But if Justin Welby is going to fall on his sword, there's some other people that need to fall on their swords also.
I don't think Justin Welby understands why he had to fall on his sword. I think there's a lot of people in leadership here that we just named who said we did nothing wrong. And it's not that you did nothing wrong, it's that you did nothing when you were supposed to do something.
Excellent point. Excellent point. They did nothing, and the choosing not to act is an action. Is a choice. Is an action itself. And so, whether or not, I think we're going to just see a slow drip in the coming days. Today's big news was the PTOs of people, retired clergy. I don't know whether active clergy. One of the fellows on the Crown Nominations Committee, Corns, I think his name is named in the Macon Review. Is he going to be forced out of the committee that will name the next Archbishop, that will create the candidates list for the next Archbishop of Canterbury? Well, if the survivors have their groups have their say, yeah, he's out. Has his PTO been withdrawn? I don't know. Is the letter in the mail? I don't know. But the push is coming. And at the same time, the internal reforms internal actions are being taking place, like the PTO and whatnot. Questions are being raised in magazines and among political leaders and commentators on the TV and newspapers that, is the Church of England capable of reforming itself? Do we need to pull safeguarding completely out of the Church of England's hands and give it to an independent body or authority that cannot be controlled by the Archbishop's Council or the bishops? Because there's the culture of deference, the culture that the bishop is always right, the culture that bishops cannot be touched. Clergy can be, suspended just on rumor with no evidence, but a bishop, it's near impossible to get rid of them. Whether that system is just so broken that they need to pull it out completely.
Well, one of the things we notice about the ACNA, the Anglican Church in North America, is they always employ a third party when questions arise with a scandal with a bishop, or many times just with clergy. They go, listen, we're hands off. We want to know what's happened here. We're going to pay an independent organization a lot of money. They make a lot of money to work this out for us, so that you know that we're above board and above reproach, and we're giving you the most honest ability to know what happened. And can we do that with the Church of England? Can we do that with other provinces? I highly recommend it at this point, because right now you do not look very healthy to the UK.
And now, a private member's motion before Parliament from a Conservative MP to kick the bishops out of the House of Lords failed, pretty strongly failed. Part of it is because that the Labour government is reforming Lords in its own fashion, and they're going to get rid of the remaining hereditary peers, and then next step will be this or that. And so they don't really want somebody else to sort of control the agenda. But that this very thing came up and was put forward by someone other than the communists, but just normal thinking people, just shows the dreadful political place the church leadership is in, coupled with the moral failings that you started off the show stating with ChatGPT. What's a bishop supposed to do? Guide and guard.
Yeah.
And what do we have bishops doing? Hide and avoid.
Yeah. Well, but back up, 50 years ago? 50 years ago. Richard Nixon was involved in Watergate, and because of his role in it and what happened, he had to resign. But Nixon was not the only one who had to resign. I think in all 6 or 7 other people had to go. I mean,
some of them went to jail.
Some went through, yeah. I mean, let's see, it was Haldeman, Ehrlichman, yeah, Mitchell, Kallsen. Who else? I can't even think of all the names. Dean. And so they went to jail. I don't know if Liddy went to jail. But
yes, G. Gordon Liddy.
He went to jail. Okay, so it's not just the head that has to go. It's that whole organization and leadership that we need to start. That I pray that the UK can use to restart the Church of England. It's a cesspool, and it's time. The church needs it, and the Holy Spirit needs it so it can refunction itself within the borders of the UK. In my humble opinion,
some of our commentators say, "Oh, guys, just don't get into politics." And politics is the way humans interact. It's the anthropology of the church that we're talking.
Yeah.
But what President-elect Trump is claiming he wants to do, of draining the swamp, removing the unaccountable creatures who control the government and the economy of the United States, the Church of England needs to drain its swamp. We have a General Synod, but what his General Synod has sort of figured out is that what they say and do doesn't matter. The Archbishop's Council will run the show, and the bishops will run the show their own way.
Yeah. Everybody has their protected corner of the administration of the Church of England, and nothing ever happens.
And like the last Lambeth conference was an absolute fiasco in any sort of rational evaluation. And if you remember, each day the rules were changed, because what was happening was the Global South wanted to have a coalition led by Archbishop Justin Badiarama and James Wong and Tito Zavala, those fellows. They would they wanted to talk about this, and it was permitted under the rules, and then Justin Welby would change the rules. And then finally, that we have no voting, we have no this or that, you just sit and listen to what I'm telling you. So in other words, the rules and the procedures that were set forward in paper were totally ignored by Justin Welby in order to achieve the end that he wanted, which was a sort of false unity, not based on truth, but based on power. Mm-hmm. That I can command that we all march in the same direction. General Synod is the same way. This whole LLF process, the bishops led by Welby have fiddled the process so that we have legal reports that are not shared, that people believe, say that what Welby's doing was improper. This is an opportunity for transparency. Now, whether you're pro or against, or for or against gay marriage, that's not so much the issue I'm speaking of. The issue I'm speaking of is a system that allows an honest discussion and debate and doesn't just force through something to achieve a desired end.
Yeah. The ends here should not justify the means. And yeah, in as such, we've seen, well, here's where we are right now. To date, it's 2024. This should have been released in 2020, if not sooner. They've had all this information, and it was a delayed release. And it's a delayed healing for the victims, and it's a delayed way for us to try and get the church back. You know, because now people are even more protected. They know how the system works. We have a quote here from Helen Ann Hartley of Newcastle. Tells channel. Go ahead.
Before we go, I want to step on a landmine and see if it goes off or not.
Here we go.
I want to ask a question. Is there an elephant in the room that we're not seeing? Peter Ball, John Smythe, Jonathan Fletcher, Mike Pilavachi. They all preyed on young men and little boys. What is it about this abuse crisis that seems to replace, Peter Ball's an Anglo-Catholic. Smythe was a conservative evangelical. Yeah. Now, Chris Brain back in the 80s and 90s at the 9 o'clock service, he would basically do stuff with women, but that was more of a cult type, almost guru situation.
And Fletcher.
But what about Fletcher and Pilavachi and these guys doing things with young men, and they are just lauded, and before everything falls apart? Is there something am I just being, what am I being? Do I see something that's not there?
I don't know, because it's not just the church. The church here is heavily involved, but I've had several viewers reach out from England and said this is also a secular function of the camps, that this is something else happening at a societal level or dealing with their multi-tiered levels. I have no idea. I don't live in England. I know English people. I love English people. Some of what happens, and this is probably because they drive on the left side of the road. That's all. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, George. But this happens.
No, it's the beer's too warm.
The beer's too warm. The reality is, evil doesn't care where it exists. It just needs to exist. It doesn't care who its victims are, whether it's a church victim or a secular victim. It just wants victims. And here we are trying to look at the scatter of what happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s within the Church of England, and it's hard to say because everybody's involved. A famous TV broadcaster was involved. He wasn't in church. Yeah. I mean, I don't get it. If you're from England and you want to tell me where and how this started and what the elephant in the room is, put it in the comments. We'd certainly talk about it.
There have been several articles saying that the problem is these Ewern camps for privileged public school boys, and that's the issue. Well, Peter Paul was an Anglo-Catholic, that completely different, no connection there, and Mike Pilavachi, no connection to the camps. So it's but different classes, different churchmanship, different externals, but the same demonic activity being lived out among the vulnerable and innocent. That I think a consequence has been the death of the Christian witness in England, where Satan has entrenched himself in a cross-section of Christian groups. And For me, snowbirds are coming. It's Florida. November's
Hi, I'm here.
almost over. I have parishioners who up north are Roman Catholics. And they come down here and they become Episcopalians in the winter, and they tell me it's because they're so mad at the Catholic Church over the abuse scandal. Their mother is buried at this, the cemetery in Danbury, and they've gone to that church and went to the public Catholic grammar school. I mean, they're culturally Catholic in the north, but when they want to worship Jesus Christ, they've got to do it in an Episcopal setting in Florida. And what pushed them out the door was not I'm so attractive and charismatic, but their horror at the Catholic abuse scandal. Is that something we're seeing and the Boy Scouts as an institution? Sure. Used to be when you and I were little, I never went any. I was a Cub Scout and I never got any far.
4-H.
Yeah. But it used to be being an Eagle Scout was a big deal, and it still is a big deal.
Yeah.
But what has happened to scouting? It's all but neutered.
Well, now here's the elephant in the room. In my opinion, why do predators go into an organization and pretty quickly get leadership roles? Okay, we saw this in a certain church near Wheaton, that a predator had entered the church, and boom, he's quickly elevated to leadership role. We see this with Boy Scouts, where predators, hey, I'm going to have a group of 20 or 30 young adolescents that I can be a father to or be a leader for. I just have to be a predator. And we see that in churches and places where young adolescent men or boys gather. There's the elephant in the room. How is that? How are we putting predators into leadership? I mean, now it's easy because we get just a whole culture of groomers. But back then in the 70s and 80s and 90s, we didn't have anything identified as a groomer. That wasn't part of our lexicon. I hope we can get to the bottom of this.
Well, I actually think I know what's at the bottom of this, and I think this is Satan.
Sure.
But it's that connection between the acts of the devil to lead us astray, and to our culture saying, "Oh, it's fine to have transvestites read stories to kids in libraries, but you can't have a Christian book club meet in a public library." In other words, that we're in such a broken world. And for those who don't follow American politics, the scandal of today is that there's a transvestite congressman just elected, or congresswoman, a transgender,
a man
oriented
who is dressing as a woman, has had no changes and no surgeries to change and no chemicals to change. This person is just a man, wearing, I'm going to get so banned on YouTube, wearing women's clothing. Is this man allowed to go into a congressional bathroom? And as of today, we learned, no, we're going to keep biological sexes apart in restrooms. And I'm for that. I don't want to scare a woman by going into the women's restroom by accident.
The woman, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who raised this issue about the new congressperson from Delaware, has been receiving death threats and vilification for saying she doesn't want a man using the ladies' restroom where she changes and stuff. It's and if I believe, some of you may not know this, or Baphomet, that the statue that the Satan and all these, the horn thing, that statue has breasts and penis. It's a hermaphrodite. The whole transgender thing is not new. It's been part of the satanic occult culture since the very beginning. And we now celebrate this on one level, and then we wonder why at the very end comes damaged young boys and girls who've been hurt badly by a culture where groomers are some cases celebrated and welcomed.
Well, and to back up, Satan's greatest victory was to convince people he does not exist. Did a good job at that. His second greatest victory was to convince women that they have no role in society other than to be workers. They don't need to be mothers. They don't need to raise their children. And if by chance you become inconvenienced by a pregnancy, there's a way out so you can continue to be a productive worker. We don't want you to have to worry about pregnancy. Oh, and by the way, if you do carry forth that pregnancy, there's options. You can help affect the gender of your growing child because you can raise them non-binary and let them at some point in the future choose who they want to be, because that's what a progressive society does, and that's what a wonderful mother does, helps her children choose who their identity is. And if they're really confused when they're 12 or 13, we can give them puberty blockers and give them more time to realize who they are. And then about 17 or 18, if they finally made that choice that they want to be a male, we can give them testosterone. A female, we'll give them estrogen, and we'll go from there. And if by chance that's just not enough, they just don't feel man enough or woman enough, we can give them surgery. We can lop off their breasts, and we can give them, well, the best we can do, a penis. And lo and behold, they will be complete, happy, normal children. Good on you, the mother of America. Kind of sucks, George. That doesn't work.
It's a lie, because they're not going to be happy. No. They're going to be sterile, unhappy. Most of them seek to, well.
Yeah.
I see this as Satan's latest bit of attack. Now,
but now to back up,
the Episcopal Church is all in on this. So,
yeah. You asked about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is evil is everywhere. It's not just in the church. It's not just in secular society. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. The problem is the church stopped identifying what is evil. What is truth? Oh, I don't know. I know truth. All right, let's move on to Helen Ann Hartley, George, of Newcastle. She tells the Channel 4 News that other bishops are too afraid to talk and are seeking higher office. And because they're doing that, they want to stay silent. And she's very disappointed. Kudos for saying she's disappointed. Kudos for being one of the very few bishops to speak up.
I've been critical of her policies. Helen Ann Hartley is progressive. She's her diocese just appointed a full-time LGBTQ chaplain, and she's been supporting interdict prayers of love and love and faith. But she's the only one, and I'm going to be vulgar, who's had the balls to stand up for what is right and true and good in this situation. She's the only one who's publicly called for Justin Welby to step down. And she did so at great personal risk to her career and to her standing. And she was asked about this by the news broadcast. I think it was Channel 4. And she said the reason, they asked, well, why haven't other bishops? She said, oh, well, many of them do, most of them do support me, but they will not speak out because they're either afraid or they're angling for a higher office. They want to go from being an area bishop to a diocesan bishop. Maybe they think they can become the next archbishop. So Helen Ann Hartley has raised the issue of the courage, character, and quality of the House of Bishops in a way that I applaud. And even though I disagree with her, if anybody deserves to be recognized as the hero in this situation, it's Helen Ann Hartley.
All right, let's talk about Mr. Ian Paul, friend of the program, certainly a friend of Anglican Inc. He sometimes shares his writings there. He sparked a little controversy by saying on TV, since Smythe, this is the guy we're originally talking about, this is the original perpetrator to the story of the Macon report. He wasn't a Church of England clergyman, so I don't know what fiscal responsibility the Church of England has to the victims. And, whoops, ouch, ooh.
Well, yeah, he said this on a panel show on TV. Now, he's not wanted to appear on our broadcast because he thinks he might get in trouble. I'm reading his mind here because, you know, he might say something. So he saved it for National British TV to get in the worst trouble that he could possibly get in. And the problem is Ian Paul said the truth. Jonathan Smythe was a lay Eucharistic minister, a layman. He wasn't a priest. The camps were not church camps. They were run by a church affiliated organization.
Yeah, organization. Yeah.
But if it came down to legal lawsuits trying to find liability, the lawyer for the victim would have to try to find a way, you know, to hook the two together when there's no clear paper trail to do so. It's like in the United States, we have these lawsuits where a parish would be sued, and then they would try it for somebody for slip and fall, or the priest was abusive, and they'd sue the parish, then they'd sue the diocese, and the diocese would say, well, we don't own the parish, you know, that's independent of us, and the parish owns its own property, so we're not liable. And then when the parish, if it wanted to leave and join the ACNA, oh, you can't do that because we own the parish, we own the property. In other words, Ian Paul was stating a legal truth that was a political sin, which is we're not going to care for the victims.
We will pay reparations to slaves from hundreds of years ago and their ancestors, but we're not going to touch this. We have legal standing here.
Well, the next day, the Archbishop of York put out a statement basically saying, wait, whoa, nothing's been decided. The redress things are commissioned, you know, no, Ian Paul, no. He was not speaking on behalf of the Archbishop's Council. So there was a 1 or 2 day wonder of furore about Ian Paul, unfortunately speaking the truth, but not putting it into the right context, or maybe he wasn't allowed to finish his statement of distinguishing between the legal and the moral, or the legal and the practical. So I guess I'm defending him and saying, look, come on our show, and we won't shut you down.
No. Well, and here's the reality. You and I say stupid things. Not every episode, but I'd say once every month and a half, I have to offer some type of correction because we were unscripted when we shouldn't to be. George, let's talk about the fallout now around the world. Many people know that Smythe was not just a perpetrator, savage in the UK. He was sent to Africa, and they're trying to do some follow-up there, George.
Yeah, Smythe basically was kicked out of England, and he went to Zimbabwe. And then when Zimbabwe fell apart, he moved to South Africa and spent the last decade or so of his life in South Africa, first in Durban, then in Cape Town. And while in Cape Town, he was involved in another of young men and youth ministries, and he would do some perverted stuff there. Well, Thabo Makgoba, the Archbishop of Cape Town, said, look, we never got any complaints. And we weren't told by the Church of England about Smythe.
To look out for him.
Yeah, and this is one of the things where Thabo Makgoba sees Justin Welby monthly, quarterly, in person, probably on email and on the phone. Mm-hmm. And Justin never bothered to pass on the information to Makgoba, which is what Makgoba says. Well, Makgoba was asked, are you going to do an investigation about Smythe down here? And early Sunday morning, he said, no, there's no need because, we haven't heard anything. Well, something happened, and by the end of the day, out comes an official statement. We are launching an in-depth investigation into Smythe and his activities on abuse. So the Smythe story is going to get legs in South Africa, and they're going to look into it. Now, part of the backstory is that Thabo Makgoba has been lambasted over the years for his insensitivity to abuse and the rape culture of South Africa. South Africa is the rape capital of the world. And there was a major story where a seminarian named June Major Dolly, 3 names, was raped by a classmate. She complained about it, and the guy was ordained, the guy went on, and it was almost treated like, well, boys will be boys. And she pushed and she made herself obnoxious to Thabo Makgoba, who basically ended her career. And if this had happened in the UK or the United States, Thabo Makgoba would be out the door, because what he did to June Major is what Welby did, or actually more on the McCarrick line of actively protecting and this and that, refusing to allow the name of the victimizer to be made. And the victim had to be the one to identify herself and carry forward the complaint. So if anything, the Smythe case is going to be a ray of sunshine on South African church culture. The South African church culture is not good in this area. South Africa has had a decline in the character of its bishops, so that my favorite is where the bishop of Umzimvubu, the day before the auditors from the diocese came, the cathedral burned down with all the records.
Oh, that was terrible.
And
hope he had insurance.
There's a major case in, I think it's Pretoria right now, where a priest is accused of all sorts of malfeasance, sexual and financial, and the bishop's protecting him. And South Africa doesn't have the culture to address these things. It's still an old boys will be boys worldview. And perhaps this is a good thing that Smythe is being taken up and Thabo Makgoba has been caught short.
All right. Anne Dyer of Aberdeen. We've talked to her about her a lot. She is that bishop who they can't seem to fire because they don't have enough money to continue the investigation. She's been accused of bullying. In fact, everybody who's worked for her has accused her of bullying. And one day, the senior bishop said, "We can't fight this anymore. Let all begons be begons, and she can go back to work." You and I and everybody else heard that she's going back to work, except for the people she works for. All of a sudden, the bully, allegedly, shows up in the office, and now we have a safeguarding issue. George, what's going on?
Well, the bully shows back up, gets served with new complaints, and goes on sick leave again. And then the Times of London on Monday ran a story saying, well, that nobody ever talked to the safeguarding people of the Scottish Episcopal Church. This bishop has been accused of severe and major safeguarding violations, i.e. bullying, and they basically decided to drop everything, but no consultation was done with safeguarding at the Scottish Episcopal Church about what,
how to work this back.
Again, it's if you're a bishop and you're caught with your pants down or your hand in the till, the rules don't apply to you the way they would if you were a clergyman.
Yeah. If this were a clergy person going back to church, they would have had weeks of talking with the parish and the vestry and how we can make this work and what are the parameters for this priest to come back.
They would have had mandatory psychological counseling, behavior modifications. Well, if you're a bishop, we can't do anything. But Anne Dyer is like Catherine Jefferts Schori. She's the gift that's going to keep on giving until she retires. For a news perspective.
Absolutely. All right. Andrew Tam has an essay on the Chinese perspective of this Welby resignation. Now, every culture is different. We know that because my camera went off a little. You and I travel the world. I've been to every continent except Antarctica and Australia in the last 20 years. I have some plane seat time. I can tell you every culture around the world is a lot different, not a wee bit, a lot different. So I'm interested to hear what a citizen of China has to say about what they think of Justin Welby, George.
Well, Dr. Tam is a Chinese Anglican who's currently a research fellow at a university in the UK. He's I think a Chinese national, Hong Kong national. And his perspective is fascinating. He's written for us in the past. Andrew Tam said that the Chinese ideal of leadership and the Chinese sense of Anglicanism is a sense of balance, of keeping all the perspectives, all the views together and allowing them to flourish within the proper parameters. Stability being the great Chinese virtue. And in that regard, Justin Welby was an abject failure, because if anything, he made the church far less stable on the level of the International Communion, on the Church of England, on its divisions and this and that. So from a Chinese perspective, and the way a leader is viewed and modeled and acts, Welby was a complete and utter fiasco. And then he went on to say something I was unaware of. His number of Hong Kong Anglicans are leaving Hong Kong because of the Chinese takeover, mainland Peking takeover.
Sure.
And they're moving to the UK as refugees. They're not joining the Church of England en masse. And it's because of Welby's being so closely tied to the pro-Peking faction of the Anglican Church in Hong Kong, so that Welby has basically picked the wrong side once again of backing the former Archbishop of Hong Kong, who was a member of the Chinese National People's Congress, which is the, well, I'll say fake parliamentary body that pledges loyalty to the party and whatnot. And so do read this article on Anglican Inc. But I think, whether or not it's true that Welby is identified as being a pro-Peking Christian, I can't say. I'm just told that. But I really am struck by Welby's big thing was unity, 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 as is the Chinese. But the Chinese look at Welby as saying, you just caused division, division, division. So your quest for unity of imposing a false unity made things much worse.
I mean, in a way, that's kind of how Marxism has changed since the 21st century. Marxism was a revolution every day, no family, and we can all be happy. Yes, you're not happy, but we, the leadership, are happy. And people died in the streets, they starved throughout the Soviet Union and China. But once the world learned of this, and China and Russia became a little embarrassed by what Marxism was doing, they said, no, you don't understand it. Marxism, the people are happy too. They like this. They like serving the government. They like serving the party. They like it. Don't confuse the death with not liking it. And all of a sudden, we have these 21st century priests who just don't know what to make of it. How can we introduce Christ into it when they believe the lie that the people like it? They like communism. It's a lie. They need Jesus. They don't need no factory. I dislike Karl Marx so much. All right, so let's move on to our next story here. Getting down to the bottom. I don't know if we have any time left to talk about politics. Vicente Mossa, elected Archbishop of Mozambique and Angola. Now, a lot of our listeners are like, who? Mozambique, Angola? That's not GAFCON or Global South. What are you guys talking about? We're talking here about opportunity, George. There's a new archbishop on the blocks.
And jealousy from George and Kevin.
Yes.
We have a 43-year-old primate and archbishop.
He doesn't
Vicente
have...
Monsosa, when he was consecrated in 2017 as Bishop of Niassa, was the youngest bishop in the Anglican Communion at 35. He's now the youngest archbishop by far. And this is actually a good thing, because one of the problems we've had is that archbishops lasting 4 or 5 years, and so there's always a turnover at the gate. Vicente Monsosa is from Mozambique. He was educated at the Community of the Resurrection in Muirfield, so he's fluent in English. And he went back to Mozambique and was made Bishop of Niassa. And Niassa, at that time, was the northern third. When his diocese was split into 3 new dioceses, he made the Nampula, Niassa, and Zambezia, along the Zambezi River. He made the choice to be bishop of the new missionary diocese of Zambezia, because his great passion is conversion, bringing the faith of Jesus Christ to people. So this is an evangelist on fire for the Lord, who is just, this is somebody to watch. The election in Mozambique and Angola, it's one province, the two Portuguese-speaking nations on the southern end of Africa, was between the pro-Welby people and which the former Archbishop Carlos Metzine was a Welby acolyte, and the GAFCON Global South allies. And by a 27-14 vote, Vincente, who represents the Global South GAFCON affiliated group, was elected. So what does this mean? GAFCON, move quickly, scoop this guy up, invite him to be a member of your primates council.
Yeah. Come on.
Global South Anglicans, invite him to your next conferences. This is somebody who speaks English well, who's alive, powerful. We're back, you know, I hate to put it in these terms, but sometimes the man makes the office and the man makes the movement. The GAFCON, when it started off with Henry Arambe and Peter Akinola, it went places.
Venables. I mean, yeah.
Greg Venables. It went places. And then we had other people come on who were nice guys, but they didn't have what some of the original guys had.
We started with the lions of the Anglican faith. People who knew what the problem was, had the solution, even though it was a little unorthodox, and were willing to work together, even though they had conflicts between them, to set afoot something new. That was amazing. Now we have a vacuum. Okay, we have no leadership from the See of Canterbury. The See of Canterbury is empty, and it will be that way for weeks, maybe a month or two.
No, I think it'll be almost a year. Almost a year.
That would be an answer to prayer.
With Stephen Cottrell being the de facto leader of the Church of England.
During this time, leaders of the church who are orthodox and who understand there is a problem, even though they don't think they have what it takes, need to gather and pick a leader who would have what it takes to be the next leader of the Anglican Communion. This is an opportunity, if not given to you by God himself, to restructure, reform, and retake Anglicanism for the 21st century. And don't sit back and think, should we? No, think we will. This is it. This is not a hem and haw moment, or this is not, that's a good idea moment. This is a take up the cross and walk forward, gather and lead, guard and guide the church. Thank you, ChatGPT. So, now's your chance.
The roadmap has already been laid out by Munir and Nice.
Mm-hmm.
The primates elect the leader of the Anglican Communion. Let the Church of England elect its own Archbishop of Canterbury. Go through its process. Now, the problem with Munir, and that's fine. The problem with Munir and Nice process was if there was a sitting Archbishop of Canterbury, you in essence would be creating a parallel or a anti-Archbishop of Canterbury. Think of Catholic terms, an anti-pope.
Sure, yeah.
Or a second pope. The office is now vacant. And instead of having to negotiate with the Archbishop of Canterbury about what powers he has and what he doesn't have, because all of this is not rule-bound. There are no rules here. Mm-hmm. It's just agreements and understandings. The primates should gather, elect their own leader, and set the new course. And rather than try to take something from Canterbury, take what's not there, and then when Canterbury finally gets its act together and has somebody say, okay, here's what you've got left. And
now,
I'm encouraged because you have people like Vincente Mendoza. I don't know what he thinks on this issue, but you've got a newer crop of people coming up at the primates level. We got the new ACNA Archbishop. These guys need not to be timid, or we'll just continue the same old for you and I, or we'll go back into the next big meeting's going to decide things.
Next meeting-itis. Yeah.
Act now. And I get it. Why should they act now? Well, there's so many little things that are unofficial. Like one of them is IARCM, the Anglican Roman Catholic Commission, whatnot. You know, they on their website, IARCM just announced that, well, they're no longer going to post news items on Twitter. We're going to move to Blue Sky because we don't agree with Elon Musk's politics. And I'm thinking, what are you guys getting involved in U.S. politics for? Just do your job. Well, they don't have anybody looking over their shoulder. So the natural left-wing bureaucratic blob mindset just takes over these institutions, takes over the Archbishop's Council, takes over the Anglican Consultative Council. And it becomes a bureaucracy that seeks to perpetuate its own jobs and power rather than serving the interests and needs of the Anglican world. But that changes if you've got a new leader who will act aggressively and affirmatively. Why does the Bishop of Chichester have to be the one sent to represent the Anglican world at the last synod on synodality? Nothing wrong with Martin Warner. Yeah. But my point is that why are we only doing it one way? Couldn't a Tanzanian Anglo-Catholic or, there are other Anglo-Catholics, or shouldn't they send a Sydney evangelical bishop?
Boom. You nail it.
To go and be there and not just be, oh, I'm so happy to be here. I can dress up and play with all my friends, but rather be a real dialogue partner in person. These are the opportunities that inaction will close off.
Boom. And that's it. We talked for 50 minutes about the Archbishop of Canterbury, who had to resign in disgrace because he didn't do anything. Showing that not doing anything is not the answer. I so encourage my brothers and sisters in the Global South and in GAFCON to use this opportunity to do something. Please, you've been given an opportunity. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 891 of Anglican Unscripted.